We have some special guests joining us today. Matthew and Monty. Monty is the owner of Wellness Capital Management and going to be giving us so much goodness today because we get a lot of questions on this topic. So I'm going to let Matthew and Monty take it away.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. Super excited for this. And Monty, thank you for joining this call. So like Caitlin was saying, we've been getting a ton of questions about people wanting to sell their practice, being reached out by private equity to acquire their business. We've had some clients that have recently sold their practice as well. So I thought it would make sense to bring on Monty on this call because he has a ton of experience in this space, understands the back end, the numbers, and has dealt with several different type of acquisitions. I'll let Monty take it over from here. And Monty, the floor is all yours.
Welcome, everybody. As Caitlin and Matthew said, my name is Monty Zwang, and I'm the owner of Wellness Capital. We're financial advisors, and we're also business brokers that work with people in this space, in this niche: health, wellness, fitness, beauty, medical spa. So I have a presentation that I've put together. It covers a lot of stuff. It's about 20 slides. I'm going to move fairly quickly and go through it. But I also want you to know that if you'd like, I'm more than happy to make this available to you at the end of the presentation. And there'll be a QR code that you can take a picture of. It'll take you right to a form. You fill it out. I'll send you the PDFs that you see today, because I know there's going to be some questions and I know there's going to be some numbers, and those are really tough to memorize. So I don't want you to do that. So shall I start? Shall I get going here? Okay. Well, thank you, Caitlin. Thank you, Matthew. Okay, let's do this. Okay, can you guys see that?
Yes, we can.
Yay, us. Okay, so I want you to realize when you're buying or selling a business, it's really important. The same way as you look at your house and you put your house up for sale, curb appeal is extremely important when you get things ready to sell. Did I miss a slide? Yeah. Okay. So when we start and we look at the whole buy-sell process, and it's important for us to understand motivation, intent, and wants behind the transaction. And we've got diametrically opposed buyer-seller. Everybody's got a different motivation for wanting to do this. Buyer wants a great price, a low price, and seller wants a great price, a high price. Buyer wants a low down payment and terms, and seller wants to collect all cash at closing. Buyers should be coming with a business plan in hand on what they think they're going to be doing, and seller prior to that should have a transition plan. So as we go down this, buyer might be coming to you with an established criteria. What do they want to buy? What do they want the gross income to be? What do they want the net income to be? The seller has to be clear in their mind as why they're selling. Buyer, on one hand, is looking for a profitable and growing business, but the seller, by contrast, absolutely knows the value of why they put the value that they've got on the business. You want your buyers to be financially capable of going through a transaction, and seller wants a qualified buyer who can operationally and financially do the business after they sell it. One thing that's really important that I've seen is we have to get ego out of this. We have to get condensation out of this. The buyer's got to be willing to learn from the seller, and the seller's got to be willing to train the buyer. And when we do this, the buyer usually seems to be much more objective in a transaction, whereas the seller is a bit more emotional and a little bit more tied to the business. So the first thing you need to do is ask yourself, is your business profitable? And what does profitable mean? This is my mantra in finance. Sales minus direct cost is gross profit minus overhead equals net profit. I don't know if you've heard the term EBITDA. EBITDA means earnings before income taxes, depreciation, and amortization. Those are big words for debt So sales minus direct cost is gross profit minus overhead equals net profit. And then you add back any debt service that you have, you add back any owner's discretionary expenses, and you add back any one-time purchases and expenses that happened this year compared to previous years or during the year that they occurred. And then we come up with what I call seller's adjusted cash flow. The higher the seller's adjusted cash flow is, the higher the value you're going to get. And I'm going to show you how that works here. I'm going to talk a little bit about valuation. So again, when you're looking at this number here, we want to be able to show the business to a prospective buyer that is as high as high a number as we can, but it's realistic as to what the seller could obtain as far as available cash flow. So I'm always talking to people who come to me and they ask me whether they should buy or whether they should build. I find that it's always best to buy because the people are buying a going concern. They're buying something that has a verifiable sales history. They're getting some management tools and some operating procedures. They know what the profitability and the cash flow is. They might be seeing underutilized treatment rooms, but those can be converted and that creates opportunity for a buyer. They are getting something that's fully equipped and would need minimal renovation. They should be buying a positive and supportive business culture. And they should, if they buy a business, they should be able to avoid the initial business loss while their business builds. Because if you start with a brand new business, you're going to lose money from day one if you have to build it yourself and put everything in place and see what works, and you're going to have some learning curve. You get to avoid that if you buy rather than build a business. So what is somebody buying? They're really buying assets, furniture, furnishings, and equipment, not necessarily leasehold improvements, the build out and the construction that you've done that stays in the space. They're buying gross sales. They're buying gross income, net income. They're taking over probably some leases and contracts that can either be assigned or assumed. They're buying operating systems, procedures, tools, manuals. They're getting a clientele with a history and their information. And they're buying existing marketing programs. What they're not going to buy, and this is something that I face as well, is that just because you have a business doesn't mean that somebody's going to want to buy it or see a value for it. They are not going to buy a business that has never made a profit. They're probably not going to buy a business that has, we're not really selling unrealized potential or changes that they could make in order to increase their profit. And they're not buying blue sky, sweat equity, years of pain, anxiety, sweat, and tears. They're buying assets and cash flow. So business curb appeal is a great exit strategy for you. It puts your business in the eyes of a business owner. And the first thing that you need to do is you need to get your books in order in business. Get your books and records and the performance of your business in a definable term so people can see it clearly. How profitable are you? What's my profit? What's my sales trends? What does my facility and assets look like? And I always ask my clients when they consider selling to put themselves in the shoes of the buyer, because pretend you're seeing the business for the first time. How would you react to it? Make sure we have a good guest experience and we have a clean online reputation. It's really important for someone to be able to not be scared by what the history of the business may or may not have been. We've got to make sure that that's all clean and presentable and attractive. Recognized branding is a great thing for people to make sure is clear and understood, because the buyer wouldn't have to go back and reinvent that. The guest in the mailing lists, are they in order? Are they clean? Are they current? Those are good things to put in place and make sure they are clean. Leases and contracts, can they be assumed, or what are they, or what's the existing term and balances on those? So again, put yourself in the buyer's shoes. Understand when you sell a business that it's important for you to understand what the buyer will be looking at and how easy and accessible and timely and clean this information is. It eases in the transition. So that's the physical curb appeal. The financial curb appeal is important too. And when you get a business together, one thing that's a fear of a lot of buyers is the owner is doing more than 20 or 25% of the services. It's really important that the owner is not the business, that the business is the business and it's generating cash flow independent of what the owner is producing. So when you're looking at preparing and getting ready for curb appeal, take yourself out of the business. Make sure that that revenue and that profit is being generated by somebody else, because you may not be around after they buy the business. Take a look at your sales volume. Can you demonstrate that it's growing in a positive direction, but yet it's not quite at capacity? Look at your profitability. Has it been consistent? Is it sustainable? Is it growing? On your balance sheet, is your equity positive? Do you have good business credit? Are your assets free and clear of any liens? And is there clear title there? Much the same as when you buy a house. Financial data needs to be well organized. It needs to be clear, and the numbers need to be defensible. I always encourage my clients to understand all this before they take a business to market, because I want my sellers and my clients to not to be put on the defensive if they get asked these questions. We got to have it ready to roll. We got to understand it. We've got to know, we have to know our business, and we don't want to take a great deal of time to go and ask somebody, because it really doesn't show very well curb appeal wise. So I think it's important to demonstrate that you've got a good financial process and the tools that can be transferred. And when I say that, I'm thinking of things like your accounting process, your bookkeeping, your point of sale, your EMR. All of that makes this transition really, really easy. And then you have to also identify, before you take this thing to market, possible financing opportunities, because we want to make it really, really easy for people to take over this business. And the value is driven by motivation. The reason the seller is selling will influence the price. And frustration and burnout on the seller side usually winds up with an undervalued business. No financial evaluation and no research equals an unrealistic value, and an unrealistic value turns into no sale. So how do we calculate this value? This is the big thing, and there's a number of different ways of doing it. I want to make sure that whatever is being purchased is sustainable and payable by the debt service that the buyer takes on. But value is determined by a combination of multipliers of gross sales and adjusted net income. So gross sales, when I say them, is what I call product, services, and packages. They're not gift certificates, unredeemed memberships, or prepaid series. When you sell a day spa, the gross sales multiplier is usually 35 to 40% of the annual revenue. In medical practices, there's 60 to 65% of the gross sales. And so an example of this, if the gross sales in both of these businesses, a day spa is $500,000, the value of the day spa would be $175,000, or $500,000 times 35%. The value of a medical spa would be $300,000, or $500,000 times 60%. You guys now know more than about 95% of the people that are operating businesses. So that's one end of the valuation. The other end of the valuation is the adjusted net income. Net income should be adjusted to reflect the business as though it has no debt, no discretionary or one-time expenses. These should be added back to show seller's adjusted cash flow. And so an example of this would be in these two spas. In a day spa, the multiplier on the adjusted cash flow is 3 to 4 times. In medical practices, it's 2 times. So let's just say in both cases that the seller's discretionary cash flow was $150,000. The value of a day spa would be $450,000 or 150 times 3. And the value of a medical practice would be $300,000 or 150,000 times 2. And then I take a combination of those. The combination of those two is going to give me the value. In gross sales, if the spa was $175,000 in gross sales and the spa was $450,000 in discretionary cash flow, take an average and that'll give you a value. 175 plus 450 divided by 2 is 312.5. That would be a value. In a medical practice, $300,000, 500,000 times 60%, medical discretionary cash flow, $300,000. Add those two together, divide them by 2, and $300,000 is a good range to start with. Now, I can hear, and I do hear, what if I feel that value is too low? What if I really think my business is worth a whole lot more? What can I do? One of the people, let's go see what the next slide is here. Okay, I'll come back to this in just a second. Oh, I'll get there in a minute. As we know, right now, today, private equity firms are buying and rolling up medical spas in today's market. The adjusted net income multiplier varies depending on the number of medical spas the company owns. Be careful what you negotiate. And we'll talk about that in just a second. But under 8 spas, the current multiplier is somewhere times 6 to 8 times the net income. Over 8 spas, the multiplier seems to be 8 to 12 times. An example here, let's say you have 7 spas, the adjusted net income is 1.05 million. The estimated value would be that 1.05 times 7. My mistake, I have a 2.1 number in there. So the estimated value would be 7.35 million. If you have 15 spas, the adjusted net income might be 2.25 million. Estimated value is 2.25, times 10, which is 22.5 million. So you can see that the value changes based on the number of spas, the amount of the net income, and the number of units that you have. So is there asset valuation sometimes happens as an alternative method of valuation? If there's not enough adequate value using the multiplier, assets may determine value. We all own a lot of equipment. We all own a lot of devices. There's a lot of value there, especially if we don't owe a lot of money on them. And so the buyer must be able to achieve a reasonable financial return, 8 to 10% on their investment in the assets. And sometimes key money is the term if the landlord controls the assets. Sometimes you have to go in and the landlord has, if the landlord has got control of the space and it's vacant, but the space is there, you may have to pay the landlord what they term key money. You own the assets then, but you have the ability to lease the space. That happens a lot in big urban markets like New York, what I just came back from. But most of the time, the value received for assets is significantly less than the seller's initial investment. Blue sky is not an asset, and neither is business potential. They're buying what's there. They're buying assets. They're buying liabilities. They're buying gross sales, and they're buying net income. So negotiation, give and take. You got to be able to think your way through and give and take on price, the terms, whether it's a stock or an asset sale. The transition plan gets negotiated and what the seller's future role is going to be. You get to choose a closing agent. You get to allocate the value, and that's a term that you take the value and divide it up into what you're actually buying. Is inventory included? Is there a premises lease that's going to be assumed? What type of liabilities is it going to take on? Is there any gift certificate liability or gift series liability? As well as make sure we know how and when the staff is going to be communicated to. So the deal process, first of all, there's a letter of intent. Then there's a purchase and sale contract, which is non-binding until the removal of all the contingencies. There's a due diligence period when people evaluate the assets and the financials. Then the contingencies get removed, and then the business gets moved into an escrow. There's a closing, there's a transfer in possession, and then training and transition happens. So this is the process that we go through. The conditions and contingencies, usually there is an offer for a price, providing that certain things check out. You want to make sure the buyer's going to want to make sure that the assets and the equipment work. So there's going to be a physical inspection. There's going to be books and records they're going to review, and they have to approve those. They got to look at the premises lease, and they got to have that assigned so they have a place to operate the business. And usually, if they're getting bank financing, the premises lease needs to coincide with the length of the premises lease. The lease needs to coincide with the length of the note, because SBA, if, for example, if they're going to give you a 7-year term, they're going to want to see a 7-year lease. If you're going to assign any of those leases and contracts. And here's where the buyer's side is important. The buyer needs to approve the seller's financial condition and operational history. The buyer's approval of seller's financial condition. There also has to be a seller's approval of the buyer's financial condition. Is this going to be conditioned on financing? Are there any, can we give them clear title? We have to put in there that our attorney can review and approve any type of transactions. There should be a defined transition plan, and there has to be an escrow closing date set. So when all these contingencies and conditions are removed, the purchase and sale agreement becomes binding. I can't stress this enough. Please, please, please keep it confidential. The only time anyone should know that a business is being sold is after the close of escrow. Only your professional advisor should know. You don't want the gossip on the street. You don't want your competitors to know. You don't want your staff to know. All of these things that could impact your ability to operate. It's nobody's business until you decide that it's time to close escrow. When there's a change of ownership and the deal is done, then you can start telling people. A non-disclosure agreement should be signed by all parties before any confidential information is shared. The employee should not know unless one of them is the buyer. And a rumored sale creates an energy that can be disruptive. It costs you employees, it costs you customers. So go ahead and assemble your team. You know, if there's gonna be, you need to know business partners, your CPA, your bookkeeper, your attorney, your consultant, your lender, and a broker are all part of this team. And one thing I wanted to say about lender and value is if you're having difficulty justifying a value and you have a relationship with a lender who you've worked with, make them the bad guy. Make them the ones that tell you what the thing is worth. Because if they're going to loan money on it, they've got a value in mind based on what the cash flow is going to generate. So how am I doing for time? I said half an hour, right? I know I moved. I feel like I'm talking pretty darn quick. But you know, if you want to talk about your specific opportunity, I'll happily do it. If you want copies of these PDF slides that I just used, there's a QR code, scan it, it'll take you to my website. There's a form you fill out. Tell me in there that the name of the class was Business Curb Appeal. Otherwise, you might wind up getting my financial stuff from New York. I hope to hear from you and be able to answer any questions for you. I'm done. Okay.
Myself. So thanks, Monty. That was a great information. And I'm so glad that you created that QR code, because there were a lot of different formulas to be looking at and great checklists that people should really be thinking about now, because it really never is too soon for getting your house in order. I loved what you shared about one, you know, keeping it confidential, because the type of energy that it brings is both positive and can be negative at the same time, and just a real disruptor to the business. I can't tell you how many clients I've worked with that, they, in essence, because they went into negotiations, they thought it was a done deal and lost, 6 months to even a year of doing business because they were so distracted and thought the deal was done. And then only to come to find out that it just wasn't happening. And man, did they lose progress. So I love what you shared about that.
Let me just respond quickly to that, because if you're deciding to sell your business, don't change the way you're operating your business. Keep operating as though you've been operating it and you plan on operating it for the next 30 years. Don't get yourself into a seller's mindset, because the whole growth and profitability and energy that goes into your business is different than it is if you're trying to grow it yourself.
Mm-hmm. Well, you gave us a list of, in essence, assembling your team. And, those attorney fees really can rack up. Mm-hmm. I'm interested to hear what and I know it varies, right? But on average, how much is it going to cost a person to do their due diligence and go through this process, regardless if they sell or don't sell? On average, what are you seeing people spending when they go down this road?
Well, I think that if you're looking at a brokerage fee, first of all, that's going to be somewhere between 5 and 10%. So that's just one number. But the broker doesn't get paid until they close the deal. So yeah. That's your lender fees are always going to cost you between 1 and 3%, depending on who your lender is. As far as your evaluation and your due diligence and things like that, attorneys, for example, I like to go to them and tell them what I need the terms to be, and that I need certain protections in there. So I would like to keep my attorney fees at, I would say, $2,500 or less if this is a pretty good sized transaction. I don't want them to draft a lengthy contract only to have me and their attorney tear it apart. I want to draft something that's mutual, but I want to tell them what I want the terms to be, and then just make sure that they put in the indemnities and the protections and the cancellation and the cancellation clauses or the out clauses. There's certain things that they will put in, but I like to keep them at $2,500 or less.
Okay, hold on a minute, Monty, because that is very interesting to me, because the last 3 clients that have gone through this process have spent anywhere between 20 to 25 grand in attorney fees.
Attorneys doing well.
Not even resulting in a sale, with only 1 of 3 of those clients that I'm referencing actually ended up in a sale. The other 2 spent, 20 to 25 grand, and they didn't even end up coming, to terms of an agreement, and they're back at the drawing board.
Nothing could make me more angry. No, if we are controlling the transaction and we are in control of what we want in those deals and those contracts, I don't want my attorney drafting something from scratch. I want them to utilize their existing experience. I want to talk things through. And again, the longer number of names on that contract or that legal firm, the more expensive your contract is going to be. I like to use my professionals with a purpose and with clear intention. This is what I need from you. This is what I need this to say. And it's the same thing with your CPA. You know much more about your business than they do. All the information that you get from them, we need taxation information. We need to know what this is going to cost us, because you can't sell a business that you've started from scratch and get a real good dollar amount for it without knowing that there's going to be some tax implications. So we need to try to mitigate that beforehand, so we know where we're going to wind up.
Yeah. You said some important things in there about, coming prepared of, this is what I want, this is my intention, going to the right professionals that have experience. So going to an attorney that, has M&A experience, right? Not a divorce attorney, or not your neighbor that does family practice, right?
My brother-in-law.
Yeah, that they're really specialized in it, and not, learning it as they go per se, because they might give you a deal and be a little bit cheaper, but in the long run, it's going to take you a lot more time. You're going to spend more money because you're going to do all this back and forth. So do it right out of the gate. Know what your intentions are going to be. And if that doesn't work out, be willing to walk away and not be attached to the sale, right?
Exactly. It's a transaction, and it's, even though we're emotional about our business, it's not an emotional event. It's just a process that we have to go through.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, let's wrap up. We'd like to keep it 30 minutes or less, but thank you so much, Monty, owner of Wellness Capital Management. We're going to link up access to his slide deck because there are different, formulas and checklists that you're going to want to keep handy, whether you are interested in selling your practice this year or a decade from now. It is never too soon to start setting yourself up for success. Not only are you going to get a bigger multiplier at the end of the day, but you're going to save yourself time, money, and heartache, and you're going to be doing things right in the first place that is going to help you to continue to grow and scale your med spa. So Monty, thanks so much for joining us. If you like this content, make sure that you share it with other med spa professionals and team members. And join us every single week live right here. You can find us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, or on Zoom every Wednesday at 2:30 Central Time. Thanks so much, guys, for joining us. See you next week.
Thank you. Great to be here.